lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and I'm running this week's read solo again. Dylan could not make it this week because this time his baby has been born. His son Ben was born, and he's taken a little bit of a break. We got a little bit of backlog of the book club episodes, so he'll still have his presence on the channel until he can come back. For the weekly reads, I thought about maybe skipping it, but there's some cool stuff that came out this week, and I wanted to talk about it. The three that I picked, I kind of switched it up from what I had said I was going to read. Still talking Primordial #1 by Jeff Lemire, Andreas Sorrentino, and Dave Stewart. Fantastic Four 35, the 60-year anniversary. I'll read the credits real quick. Dan Slott, Jason Liu, Mark Waid, John Romita Jr., Paul Renaud, J.P. Mayer, Cam Smith, Mark Moras, Rafael Fonteras, Scott Hanna, Mark De Gracia, Eric Arciniega. And the other book is Hellboy and the BPRD, 1957, by Mike Mignola, Chris Roberson, Lawrence Campbell, and Dave Stewart. There is another book that I plan on talking about, but since it's not a book that's for the faint of heart, Red Room #4, doing a separate episode for this, so be on the lookout. This one will be dropping tomorrow, as of the day this video will post. These three books were definitely the standouts to me, and I can't even remember. I think I was gonna talk about the Eternals, the Thanos Rises, I believe is the name of it. Couldn't get to it this week. Just thought I'd switch it up. Completely forgot that Hellboy was coming out, and anytime Hellboy comes out, it's always a good week. Let's start with Hellboy, Family Ties. It's a one-shot. Not really much to unpack, other than, it's just your typical possession story kind of deal. And Hellboy and Sue, his partner at the time, as I said, this is 1957. They got a call. They're going to this house, talking about a book of witchcraft and demonology, and you can imagine what ensues from there. Lawrence Campbell's art, Dave Stewart's coloring is just phenomenal. Obviously, Mignola and Chris Roberson have been doing some stand-up stuff in terms of like the Hellboy and BPRD stuff that's been coming out. I've been digging it, every single one, whether it's the mini series, they got like 2-issue stories, 3-issue arcs, one-shots. It's all been great. And as I've said before, I think I've said this on a few different episodes, Hellboy is one of my favorite characters of all time, and Mignola's definitely, if not on my Mount Rushmore, he's interchangeable with other creators, because he's just had such a huge impact with his work for me. But I love these one-off stories. There's a possession that's taking place. The mom is, she's the one that's seeking help. There's something wrong with her son. Not sure what it is. We see the house is disheveled, stuff like that. And, we kind of start hearing about like the grandmother and how she always had a temper. And it ends up being, not, I'm going to spoil this, but it ends up being not the son, but the grandmother that has been possessed. And just a fucking super creepy story. Definitely what you want out of a Hellboy story. Again, there's not much to unpack. It's just, you can never go wrong getting a Hellboy comic. It is always top notch. It's creepy as fuck. The little boy's mouth is sewn shut. And anybody that's not familiar with Sue Yang, she's got powers. Obviously, she works with the BPRD and can, telepathic powers. Kind of digs deep and finds out the mystery of the sun calling down demons. It ends up attaching itself to the grandma, and just fucking shit hits the fan here. Creepy ass monsters. That's one thing that I love about Hellboy is the creatures that we see in the book are always so, I mean, it doesn't scare me, but they're terrifying looking. I can only imagine if like this was something in real life. I just can't get enough of Hellboy beating the shit out of monsters and creatures. And, stories all told one issue. And again, like, that's a lot of the Hellboy, the one-shots that have taken place over the years, or even like the 2-issue miniseries. I like that they're, very compact, concise. You don't really need to. You could jump into Hellboy with this book and not really need to know a whole lot of backstory. And that's what I think is great about the entire line of Hellboy books. There's really no bad spot to jump in because even the main, I guess you could say the main, series that were taking place, the mini series that were consecutive, even those weren't in within the same time frame. Like they would jump back and forth, and that's what I've really been digging about this is that ever since Hellboy and the BPRD, I think 1952 is when Mignola started doing it. Been getting all these backstories, some touching on past stories that we've heard about years ago in some of the other Hellboy books. But definitely go pick this up. Awesome, awesome one shot, and I believe there's a couple more one shots that are going to be taking place in the 1957 year, and I'm here for all of it. Next up is Primordial #1. This one is, I love Jeff Lemire. You can never go wrong when you pick up a Jeff Lemire book. He works with some of the, not only is he an awesome cartoonist himself, but he works with some of the best artists in comics. Andrea Sorrentino, who he teamed up with on Green Arrow. He did Gideon Falls, which just ended, that book was such a fucking trip. I don't even know how to describe it. It's, got so many like weird elements, definitely like Dark Tower vibes to me. And he's a huge fan of like David Lynch and stuff like that. And you got all those in that book as well. And if you haven't read Gideon Falls, make sure you pick it up. But same creative team on this book. And, this is kind of set in an alternate world where Nixon won the election and Kennedy didn't. And, the space race and all that stuff and sending the animals out and not super familiar with like how they came back. If they came back alive or not, but this book has that mystery vibe to it, right? It definitely leans into a lot of the elements that we saw in Gideon Falls, where it's especially with the art, Sorrentino, the way he plays with panels. You can't beat this. I absolutely love his art style. I know that I've heard people say it's not for them. I'm not one of those people. I think it's really cool what he does, how he plays with stuff artistically. Just a huge mystery. Like I can't wait to see what else has changed with Nixon having won the election as opposed to Kennedy, and they're trying to shut down the space, basically shutting down NASA and mentioning stuff like Kennedy warning Nixon that some of his actions could put the United States and Soviet Union on the brink of all-out war. Just a lot of crazy shit is taking place. This page in particular, holy fuck! I don't know how do you describe this. If you're only listening and you're not watching this, pick this book up. I can't even begin to describe what we're seeing here. It's got an espionage feel to it. This whole NASA thing and Men in Black type like elements. It kind of has a little bit of that as well. And the animals are, I don't want to say they're the main characters, but they're a main focal point. And talking about how the monkeys didn't die, even though NASA said they did. Sputnik 2 didn't fail like they reported. So there's all this shit of, stuff being hidden from us and being lied to. And what could have possibly happened to these animals, Abel and Baker, the primates that were sent into space. Basically, having been two different governments lying about what took place, saying that these apes didn't survive, and shutting down both space programs, right? But what really happened to them was so terrifying that they didn't even want to try to get to space anymore. And the animals didn't die, they were taken. And taken by who? This is where shit gets super fucking weird. I'll leave it at that. There's not much more I can say on it. Primordial is definitely your typical Lemire book in terms of you kind of get the groundwork of what's going to take place. There's a mystery that's underlying in what's going on, and the final page is always going to be that what the fuck moment and want make you want to come back for more. I definitely think that. Well, fuck it. I mean, I had a hard time describing this book, and it's kind of like with Gideon Falls. I had a hard time describing that first issue to people when I first picked it up. Other than I just have complete faith in Lemire and Sorrentino. It's a really dope. The concept is there. It's awesome, and I think that if you've read Gideon Falls, this is definitely a book you're gonna like if you like that book. If you're just a fan of Lemire, you didn't read Gideon Falls, but you like some of his other stuff, this is definitely this is definitely a book that should be on your radar. It's definitely a book that you're going to want to keep your eye on because this looks like something that could easily eventually be adapted into film or television. And if it's anything like the other books that he's got in the works in terms of being adapted, you'll definitely want to have this book in your collection. Last book I'm going to talk about here is Fantastic Four 35. This is a big boy. This is a $10 book. This is thick as fuck. I've been off and on with the Fantastic Four. I'll be the first one to admit I'm not the biggest Dan Slott fan. He's hit or miss for me. Wouldn't say I don't like his work, but it's also not a go-to. His Fantastic Four run has been, there's been good stories and there's been stories that I didn't really care for as much. This takes place shortly after the Bride of Doom arc. Doom did something to Johnny Storm to where he can't turn off his flames. He is constantly on fucking fire. Not to mention the fact that we have John Romita Jr. drawing the entire story. I, for one, think JR should only do Marvel. I think that Marvel is just his sweet spot. I think his style just, for some reason, to me, fits better in the Marvel universe than it does in the DC. I don't know if that's because of who inks him or what, or maybe he has more of an affinity for the Marvel characters, and that's what, and it comes through in his art. But I think that this one is really dope. This particular story, we got King is the main villain of this. We got all his different alter egos. We got Ramatut, Immortus, the Scarlet Centurion. This is a time travel thing. They're looking for pieces of a machine that they're trying to create. And in turn, there's constant bickering. I also don't know a ton about Kang. I know I talked about Kang #1 with Dylan a couple weeks back, and I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about him. I know a little bit about his different identities, especially because of Tom Shilley's Fantastic Four Grand Design, where he really delved into and condensed the entire history of the FF. But then we get a new iteration of Nathaniel Richards, who's Reed Richards' dad. Which again, like it's so fucking. The whole history of King is confusing. But we get a new one called Scion, and there's a whole mystery of that. Like he is supposed to be of a timeline further out than King. I love that they're basically going on a treasure hunt, and they're going to different points in the history of the Fantastic Four. We get the TVA in here too. They make an appearance. But what I love the most, and even though there's chapter breaks in terms of this, like we get an old school Fantastic Four cover from the 60s where they're facing Ramatut. We get a young Fantastic Four here. I'm not going to spoil too much of the actual details of this, but it is cool going back and seeing, some of the past iterations of Fantastic Four that maybe I am familiar with, and then, there's one in the 90s I'm not so familiar with that time period. But we get kind of an inexperienced team here fighting against Ramatut. And in each of these flashbacks, the Fantastic Four is defeated, essentially killed. And then as they come back, they're telling their story so it can be entered into the Great Book and recorded in the Great Book by Immortus. And then we jump into the 90s. I love that they go back with the old, covered logo designs, all that stuff. I mean, even this ad from like 93 when these were on all the Marvel books, we got the Thunderbolts. And huge Thunderbolts fan. And it's cool to see the team, back then from this era and it even says this is a few months after the cataclysmic event Onslaught, and then it jumps because Scarlet Centurion Cap takes them and is going to pit them against the FF before they are taken off planet. This is a few months before the Onslaught thing, and you can even see like that at one point the Thunderbolts did take over the Four Freedoms Plaza and had made it their headquarters. But what I really dug about this particular time period of this this particular chapter of the book is I didn't know this whole thing with like Thing, and he had fought Wolverine and he had to wear a helmet. This was some stuff I wasn't familiar with, so this was kind of cool to see this team and the Thunderbolts kind of just squaring off. I really dug it. And that's one thing Dan Slott, I really like his characterization of Ben Grimm, aka the Thing. Gets his voice down perfectly. Then we, again, we jump back. They're defeated. We go to the Hickman era. This is shortly after Johnny Storm has returned from the dead, or what they thought he was dead. He was actually trapped in the negative zone. So this is just a total fucking, in my opinion, kind of a love letter to just the Fantastic Four in general, and touching on the different eras, and even these moments of Johnny Storm and Thing, and like you've seen their relationship just in the preceding chapters, the different time jumps, the way their relationship has grown, and where Johnny would only tease him, but then he's like comforting him, saying like, look, dude, it wasn't your fault that I died, and all that. And these are the moments that really make Fantastic Four, to me, a great Marvel comic. It's the family aspect. Yes, they're a superhero team, but they're a family first. Squaring off against Kang. Fucking systematically takes all of them out viciously, comes back, and then you see Scion. He is now going to tell his story, and this is supposed to take place in the present. And what he does here is he ages Johnny and Sue, de-ages Reed and Ben, and then kills them. And then when they go back and he's telling the story, they're like, we can't enter this into the great shared biography that we murdered 2 babies. And they're like, listen, it's one thing to kill, but like to kill them, it's unthinkable that I could evolve into that. And I think that it's kind of funny that they're evil as shit, but they'll only go so far. And here's where the spoilers are going to take place. Scion tells them that you're right, I lied, and he basically took their victories from them by pulling Sue from the 60s era, Ben from the 90s era, Johnny from the Hickman era, and then we see that it's Reed under the cowl. So the battle ensues. We get a Fantastic Four from multiple decades fighting against Kang and all the different versions of him. And just like I said, I absolutely love seeing John Romita Jr. back at Marvel. There's just something about it that just it puts a smile to my face. And I'm definitely excited to see where this is going to go in the ongoing. This definitely made me want to continue reading the series. I picked it back up again for the Bride of Doom storyline, and I definitely knew I was going to pick up this, and I won't spoil the very end of this, but it's definitely going to be something interesting to see how the team and the family deals with the repercussions of what took place in this particular arc. And then, in the backup, we got a 2-pager by Jason Liu, and we get Mark Waid with Paul Renaud, which I absolutely adored this story too. Kind of just Reed telling people the history of the team and from his perspective, and he's very, very humble about it, taking he talks about how he's he kind of takes the blame for what happened to his family and why he didn't want them to feel like freaks, and that's what kind of made him want to start the superhero team. And there's a moment in here with this moment right here with Johnny where I didn't realize and I don't know if it's ever been seen before, where like he was terrified because he constantly thought he was gonna fucking light something on fire or blow something up, and just seeing Reed dealing with the responsibility that his bravado, and his ego kind of could almost destroy his family. I just think that this is just a great snapshot of the Fantastic Four and what makes them so special and kind of why they are Marvel's greatest family. And then I'm pretty sure that's Tom Scioli, but I mean I could be wrong. It looks like Scioli, and I think it's cool if it is. And then this double page spread of over the years their battles of Doom, Galactus, and Nihilus. Just definitely a great story. Mark Waid, who wrote one of my favorite runs of the team with Mike Wieringo, the early 2000s. But this is definitely one of the better anniversary issues. Like I'm very skeptical on anniversary issues when they come out. I never know how they're going to roll. Sometimes, it just feels like filler. But this one was awesome. I mean, hands down, probably one of my favorites. Definitely worth the $10 for sure. I definitely think it was very critical of like the Venom. What is it, Venom 200? I didn't think that one hit the mark for me, but this was definitely a win for me. Definitely, I'd say a solid 9 out of 10. Definitely, if you're a Fantastic Four fan, haven't been reading the book for a while, good way to kind of reintegrate yourself into the title. And also go pick up Hellboy BPRD 1957 and Primordial #1. All worth your money. And don't forget, I will be talking about Red Room on its own episode. But that's all I got for this week's books. And for next week, not sure if Dylan will be joining me or not, but these are the books that I think I will be reading. As of now, I'm thinking X-Men Legends #7, Death of Doctor Strange #1, and probably talk about King Spawn #2. Something else comes up, or I feel like switching that up, probably, throw something else in there as well. But tentatively, those are what we'll talk about next week. And if you're not already following us, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at The Comic Lounge. Follow Dylan at The Dillbot on Instagram. Dillbot is dope on Twitter. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon so you're notified every time a new vid goes up. And on that note, I'm out.